can you trust him? Dallas, can you trust him? Kyrie, can you trust him? Luka, can you trust him? Kyrie in the playoffs. I think he's won 2 playoff series since they won the title with Bron. Luka in the playoffs. We've seen his fatigue weigh on him. So really, what I don't trust is individually in the playoffs, what they do.
17 offensive rebounds for the Dallas Mavericks. Irving dancing, prancing, pulls up, three-pointer, bang!
When it comes to the most cursed franchise in NBA history, the LA Clippers take the cake as the most snake-bitten team of all time. And despite having 4 Hall of Famers, Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, even Paul George, this team time and time again comes up short and snatches defeat from the jaws of victory.
George, way off, hits the side of the backboard.
So, understanding the Clippers' curse, the long story history of that curse, who in their right mind tempted fate with this sign, Dallas to Cancun, before Game 5? Now, to their credit, this sign was actually kind of prophetic, as of course the Clippers in Game 5 had their biggest playoff loss in franchise history, and then 36 hours later in Game 6, went to Dallas, lost, and like the sign predicted, are now in Cancun. And when it comes to both these teams' star duos, that being Luka and Kyrie versus Paul George and James Harden, I mean, both these duos in the series put up pretty good numbers. But in the pivotal points of the series, one duo rose to the occasion, and the other one just fell flat. Luka Doncic in the third quarter alone outplayed James Harden and Paul George for their entire game performance, as Luka in one quarter, 14 points, 5-8 shooting, with a plus-minus of +10. James Harden for the entire game, 7 points, 2 of 12 shooting, 32 minutes, a -25. Paul George, 15 points, 4 of 13 shooting, 33 minutes, a -16. And while Luka was brilliant in Game 5, the guy who stole the show in Game 6 was of course Kyrie Irving. And if you watch this Game 6 very closely, for the entire first half Dallas was just dominant. But still at halftime, it was a tie game. Kyrie in the second half, quite possibly the best game he's had since the 2016 finals. As in one half alone, 28 points, 10-13 shooting, 0 turnovers, and a +14. Now get this, James Harden and Paul George combined for the second half, 11 points, 4 of 14 shooting, 1 turnover, a -32. That right there is Paul George and James Harden in a nutshell. In the biggest games, the biggest quarters, even just the biggest halves of their season, both these guys don't show up time and time again. And for Harden specifically, I mean, this is deja vu from 2023 versus Boston. And in games 5 and 6 versus Dallas, here's the stat lines. 11.5 points per game, 25% shooting, 7% from deep, nearly 3 turnovers. Game 6 and 7 versus Boston, nearly identical. 11 points, 25% shooting, under 10% from deep, but this time had 5 turnovers.
Listen, James, have you ever had those friends who had bad roommates? Over and over they complained about their bad roommates. This guy's terrible, the bad roommate here. They never thought, be self-aware enough that they're the bad roommate. They're the problem. Hey, James, you're the problem.
If you're still betting on James Harden 2024 to have a big-time game, big-time performance in a critical moment and win a championship, I mean, you gotta be out of your mind. And look, to Harden's credit, in this series, just like versus Boston, had some big-time games. But again, in the most critical moments, most critical games, Harden again does not show up. And what makes that even worse, James Harden not being a closer in comparison to Kyrie and Luka being closers, that makes it even worse, as Kyrie now in his career is a perfect 13-0 in closeout games. And probably the most surprising aspect of this series was how good Dallas was defensively. But if you look at their post-trade metrics, Dallas, on the defensive end, they've been above average, if not a great defensive team. As the Clippers on the season, 115.6 points per game. This series, 100.3. Offensive rating, it was top 5 in the league. In the playoffs, an 8-point drop. field goal percentage, kind of a basic metric, they ranked 6th on the year. In the playoffs, they were 2nd to last. The incredible offensive drop-off for the entire Clippers team, it is very James Harden-esque. But at the same time, gotta give credit to Dallas, Luka, and Kyrie, because both those guys defensively stepped up in the biggest games. And that right there for Luka specifically is one of the biggest false narratives of the season.
And one of the more important differentiators that I used for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is that he is a two-way player. He's top 10, top 12 in defensive win shares. You got to go a little bit further down to find Nikola Jokic, and way further down to find Luka Doncic, who is not a better than average defensive player.
Now, that guy Chris Mannix right there has an actual vote for MVP and is a, quote, respected source for all things NBA. Now, listen to him talk. What was his defensive expertise, his insight, to Luka not being a good defender or a deserving MVP candidate? It was the fact Luka doesn't play defense and his defensive win shares aren't up to par. Looking at 2024 the defensive win share ranks, Nikola Jokic was 2nd, SGA was 8th, Luka 18th. Defensive plus minus, the Joker 1st, SGA 7th, Luka 16th. Even by Chris Mannix's own metrics, Luka this year was a pretty good defender. I'm not saying he's all defense, all world, a prime Gary Payton. I'm not saying that. But in comparison to previous years, Luka in 2024 made tremendous strides on that end of the floor. And if you look at Luka's defense versus the Clippers, I mean, it's actually very, very impressive. Clippers offensive players versus Luka shot 40.7% on 108 attempts. Luka on defense forced 17 turnovers, and for the entire playoffs was top 15 in defensive win shares. Looking at Kyrie, very, very similar. The Clippers on the series versus Kyrie shot 42% on nearly 60 attempts, and Kyrie on defense forced 9 turnovers. The stats right there are pretty fantastic, but if you watch the actual games, Kyrie's defensive effort, even if guys are making shots, making tough plays, the effort was there and the intensity was ratcheted up 3 notches. Contrary to popular belief, Kyrie's defense, Luka's defense, the entire Mavs team defense, that wasn't the problem this series. The biggest problem I saw was Luka Doncic not making threes, which is kind of odd considering on the season, his best year from deep at nearly 10 attempts per game. Now, despite the bad 3-point shooting, both Luka and Kyrie in the clutch in the fourth quarters were still fantastic. As in comparison to every player in the first round, both Kyrie and Luka were top 5 in scoring and top 10 in plus minus. And Kyrie at nearly 10 points per game on 50-50 splits, Luka nearly 7 points per game on 48-46 splits. Among the best duos in the NBA at fourth quarter scoring, Luka and Kyrie in the first round ranked first ahead of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And doing a head-to-head comparison, Luka and Kyrie versus Paul George and James Harden, I mean, it's almost laughable. Kyrie and Luka nearly 100 points combined. 50% shooting from the field, 50% from 3, with a plus-minus of plus 55. Harden and Paul George, 54 points, 18 of 40 shooting, sub 30% from 3, with a plus-minus of minus 51. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the series and why Dallas won and the Clippers yet again came up short and didn't advance. And on a personal level, seeing Kyrie and Luka succeed, being a big fan of Dallas, what they're building, I mean, it's a long time coming. As of course last year in 2023, after the Kyrie trade, Dallas got all jumbled up. These guys took major hits from the media, rightfully so. But if you're going to criticize them when they're down, make sure to praise them when they're up and they're succeeding. So that right there is the end of the video. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.